Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Build a Business with Brandon. We have Joel McDonald of Get Out of Town. Joel and I met each other just a few weeks ago at, the word incredible would describe it, right, Joel? It was a great mastermind meeting in Las Vegas. I think everybody was so attentive to Perry and the copywriting that we didn't get to talk that much, but then Joel and I met over lunch and struck it up because his online business, which is pretty cool, that we're going to talk about, called Get Out of Town. And
just get out of town.
Just get out of town. Just get out of town. But it's short. What's the acronym everybody uses for a verb?
JGoot.
JGoot. And we're going to JGoot it today.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Joel to take us through, because he has a really great story. The reason I want to have him on is because he had a business and he actually shut that business down, but built this business in the background. And then as soon as he could basically cash flow himself with this thing, jumped into it, and he's killing it. And Joel, maybe you can we'll talk about in between what you did with consulting, because I picked up some really good tips. I don't want to give the most secret tips on here, but I want to give some tips that people could use. And you're without a doubt an expert in online advertising. So with that, can you walk us through, Joel? Thanks so much for coming. How you got, where you started your career, and then how you wound up here at Just Get Out of Town.
Oh, wow. So, it's been a long evolution. When we kind of talked about it at lunch, you asked what got me into self-employment. And to be honest, I've always been self-employed. The only paycheck job I've ever had was at a grocery store when I turned 16. And ironically, that was a pay cut from when I was a paper boy.
Wow.
I remember after getting my first check, it's like, this is lame. I had 3 routes. I was paying my route supervisor to fold papers for me, because that was the most time consuming part of my job. And so I paid my route supervisor to fold them. And, I could ride my bike from the middle of the street and put every paper on the porch. So I had 3. At one point I had 4 routes, but it was too much.
Wow.
And I think that was probably the beginning of my entrepreneurial spirit. It was when I kind of got bogged down from a paycheck and was working way more hours and earning way less. And haven't really looked back since. I've always just been self-employed. And, I went and I did the college thing, but went to a mediocre college. I got mediocre grades. I didn't have any standard employment options coming out of school. So
what did you do? You basically didn't like getting that little piece of cheese every 2 weeks, what I call it, and graduate college. And where do you go?
So I also didn't really have any direction.
This is the story shaping up.
I still had no clue going into senior year, midway through senior year, still had no clue what I was going to do. And,
what did you major in?
Business.
Okay, well, that's good.
Very generic. So, I had a good generic knowledge base to work with, but had no clue what I was going to do with it. And I actually told a friend that. So something I didn't realize that was an asset of mine was I bought a house freshman year because it was cheaper to buy a house and get housemates than it was to rent. And senior year, I was fixing the house up. My friends were all out at the river, and a friend was helping me paint. And she said, what are you going to do next year when you graduate? And I said, I have no clue. And she said one thing. She said, it seems like you're doing it. And I had never even considered real estate as a career, but it all just made sense. I bought a house young. I convinced friends on buying houses because of, I convinced them of the investment value and so on. And, I had a good sense for numbers thanks to my parents' upbringing. And it just made perfect sense. And then, that was the beginning of this path of just having mentors or people in my circle who saw talents in me that I didn't even see. So the second I said that and kind of went public that I was going to be a realtor, it got out. My grandfather found out. He raised 11 kids 28 grandkids, including me,
Wow.
or not raised, but,
Took care
raised
of.
11 kids, put them through college, put 28 grandkids through college. And the
Holy,
second he found out I was getting into real estate, he flew me out over spring break and showed me up and down Colorado. He said, you don't want to be in Northern California. Come out to Colorado. I'll teach you everything I know and get into real estate.
and he was in real estate. He was a real estate broker, or did he own a company?
Developer.
He was a developer.
Developer and builder. Also had a lot of experience. I mean, he built the board of realtors in the MLS system back in the 60s, 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, all of his sons followed in his footsteps. Some of his daughters did. Like I said, I was the first grandkid to follow in those real estate footsteps. And yeah, year later, I packed up and just moved to Colorado.
Now you pack up, you move to Colorado, you got your real estate license at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I moved in, I just stayed with my aunt and uncle who were like a mile from the real estate office. I did a crash course, got my license, and was a realtor a month later.
Now, what's the trick? Like, I guess you started advertising and just showing people homes? I mean,
it's funny. As a 21-year-old kid fresh out of college, I was following all of the rules. I joined a big franchise that had a very impressive training program. And they were all about cold calling. They were all about marketing to, they call them FSBOs, for sale by owners. People trying to sell their house themselves. So I was following all of the best practices. And it turns out just spinning my wheels. No one wanted to trust selling their biggest asset to a 21-year-old kid. I went 8 months without getting a commission. And a funny thing happened. It's a long story, but long story short, I basically said, okay, it's time to paint or get off the fence. I had another phrase in mind, but you asked me not first, so.
Yeah, I appreciate the PG rating.
And so I threw out all the textbooks. It wasn't working. I went and someone else in my office had a house that they were listing. It was a really nice house. I was surprised it hadn't sold. I said, hey, can I go hold an open house for you? And I literally sat at the open house and just collected names. And I would just ask people, what are you looking for? And, they would always come in with their guard up, just saying, no, we're not interested. We just don't want to see the house. Yeah, that's cool. And then they would give feedback and say, well, it's not right for us. We want a 3-bedroom. This is only 2 or whatever. And so I would say, oh, okay. And then what else are you looking for? Was this in the right price range and so on? So I would keep this tally, and then just kind of say, well, I can think of a couple other houses that I'd be glad to email them to you. And I did that over and over and over and over.
The open houses, just
open houses,
basically your list building. Your list building here.
List building, 80s or 90s retro style. Before I knew it, I had hundreds of prospects who I was, back then, it wasn't even, email wasn't popular. I was licking and sending envelopes.
Wow.
It got to the point where I kept our receptionist busy 4 hours a day, licking and sending envelopes.
Typing these letters.
That's so big by just asking a simple question. What are you looking for? Would you like me to keep an eye out for you? And I would just send it. And then, people would always say, well, we're not ready yet. Well, that's okay. Just take a look at them. And when something looks good, give me a call. And even that was a struggle. I was about to quit that, it was several months, but then all of a sudden it just was a windfall, I had gotten to the point where I was crawling under my desk when I answered the phone because it was mostly people saying, can you quit sending us stuff? We bought a house. Can you quit sending us stuff? We bought a house. But all I could focus on is all right, they're all saying they bought a house. So I'm obviously targeting the right audience. I just got to keep up with it. And then finally, occasionally calls came through that were yeah, we're ready to start looking. Do you sell houses too? Yeah. And, I kind of did the math. It's like, okay, so I've been sending to a couple hundred people and I've got one phone call so far, but that's 2 transactions. And those 2 transactions turned into, I don't know, $15,000 or $18,000. Not bad. So, I mean, from that point forward, I ramped it up. I was on the computer every day. Like email had started to become more popular. I was on the computer every day, copying and pasting, sending emails, to the point that I got asked to get my own computer, because I was in it was like a office. There were like 3 office shared computers. And they're like, yeah, we have 20 realtors and you're tying up one of 3 computers all day, every day. And, so you got to get your own computer. And so I did that. I hired an assistant, and before I knew it, I had to leave. I couldn't afford. It's not that I couldn't afford, but it got to the point that the minimal split in the management fees I was paying management, if I just started my own shop, I could take that tiny percentage and pay a full-time assistant.
And you ran the numbers, Joel, right? You're a numbers guy. You basically built a business plan, and you were seeing it as it evolved.
Right. Well, and that's the key. Like I beta tested on a shoestring budget. It costs nothing to sit in an open house. It costs nothing to write down their email address. It costs nothing to email them, but time. But right. I had nothing but time because I wasn't making sales.
Right.
And then so I kind of built out a proof of concept, and once it started working, I just 10x'd it. And it got to the point where, they would have, when I before I left, I had my picture up for Agent of the Month in 11 out of 12 months.
Wow. And
the 12th month was December, and that was because I just took it easy starting in October, because I hit my annual goal in October and just kind of hit cruise control for the rest of the year.
Joel, are you keeping track of, as a fellow list guy, were you keeping track of metrics back then and saying, at some point, I know that for every 100 emails or for every 200 emails or 300 or whatever it was, that I get a hit or a sale effectively?
Yeah. Yeah. And so at that point, I had started to grow. I had evolved from it, licking and sending envelopes to email. And then, I had started advertising. This was before Google. Wow. I was buying AOL banner ads. And man, was that the wild, wild west days. You could get 100,000 impressions for $10 or something. It was just crazy.
Right.
So, and then, pay-per-click advertising was new. It was pretty basic, you could look at what your competitors were bidding and just outbid them. So I started ramping that up. I was busy full time, and then agents came to join me, which was not intended. But then it's like, all right, well, I'm not going to be the broker that I resented and just left. So every agent that comes on board, I'm going to earmark an advertising budget, and I'm going to make it rain for them.
Wow. That's
my job. And before I knew it, I was up to 35 agents.
Holy cow.
We were kind of we were approaching anarchy, because I was providing 80% of their business. They're on the worst split plan in town. And by split plan, I mean, in the real estate world, you're typically on a split with your broker. And, a lot of brokers will start you off at 50-50, but the second you start selling some houses, you can graduate up to 70-30, 80-20, et cetera. And then eventually you get so productive, you go to a Remax or a Metro Broker desk fee plan, and you just pay a desk fee and you keep everything. Well, I was 50-50 for everyone. Even my top producers were on 50-50, and I gave them bonuses if they exceeded those metrics. So I'd say, I'm giving you 100 leads a month. You're expected to have, after 3 months, you're expected to have 3 closings a month from those leads. 3%, that's all I ask. If you exceed that, you get big fat bonuses. If you don't hit that, well, you remain a 50-50 subscriber until it gets so bad that I have to ask you to leave. And I usually wouldn't have to ask them to leave if they weren't doing that volume. usually leave on their own. So we kind of hit this point where agents were starting to resent that. And I said, all right, the reason this is the case is because I'm spending 6 figures a month in advertising to generate you guys' business. And well, I wasn't to 6 figures then, but this next step was how we evolved. So, it was working so well. I wanted to expand, but banks wouldn't loan me money on nothing but a subscriber list. And so I basically said, tell you what, you can buy your client list from me, and then you can be on a 100% plan. You can just pay me a desk fee, and then you have the skin in the game. You assume the risk on whether or not you choose to follow up with those leads. And once we did that, it exploded. We almost overnight went to 70 agents.
So is a desk, I'm going to interrupt you for a second just to make sure. Is the desk fee very similar to the salon model where you basically rent the chair?
Yeah.
And it's a set fee?
Correct.
And you were willing to, as a business owner, I just want to recap here. You were an agent. You then really became the business owner, but ultimately the marketer. So you're becoming a marketer that you're just feeding leads to people, which, if you could do that for me right now, I'd love you. And I go all day long, but I guess my question to you is, it seems like you would have more upside if you kept feeding them the leads and sharing in the percentage, or was the desk fee from volume of the additional people easier for you and offset it? And then you use the leads yourself, or you sold them the leads for, 25 cents a piece?
Yeah, basically, we, once they bought me out, so we agreed on a figure. We came up with a per 10,000 lead price for the agents to buy. And like minimum buy-in was 5 or 10,000 leads. And some of my agents bought 50,000 leads and built teams. And so the motivation was the buyout. That was like the beginnings of an exit plan for me, because, we're like at 2005, and I'm not going to pretend that I had the foresight to know this, but it was like, well, this is the next step. I'm going to focus more on what I do best, which is lead generation, and let the agents focus on the real estate business. So it wasn't for the desk fees. I was losing money at that. But I spun off my second company. So I built this real estate company, but it was having struggles because of growth and resentment about being on 50-50 splits. So I said, hey, you want to step up to the plate and have more risk? Here's how we do it. So they bought the list, and I spun off a marketing company who they bought leads from that point forward. So instead of being on a split or renting leads from me and for forever being on a 50-50 split, they instantly went to a 100% split, and they instantly went to a desk fee or a transaction fee, actually, which was, hundreds of dollars. It was negligible. And, but they bought leads from me. So, then they started paying me up front, and then they could do whatever they wanted with the leads.
So now you split off, you figure out that the business model for you selling them leads could be worth more, basically because they're resenting the 50-50 split, which seems fair, but when there's money involved, everybody starts to question everything, right? So now you've got this other engine effectively, which is another company feeding your other company, and you're making money all around, because even if you're breaking even with the desk fee, net, they're not going to get their own leads themselves because it's hard, and you're feeding them. That's basically the business model, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I had plenty who tried. I don't know. I guess I had a knack for just effectively buying leads, because I had a 5-year head start on them, and I just kind of intuitively knew how much to spend, where to find that traffic, which leads were better than others, which sources of traffic were better than others. And so, yeah, it allowed me, what I was envisioning was I could scale the business. I could franchise a marketing company and go and sell leads in other states. So, yeah, I essentially left the real estate business. I was still there in name, but I hired a broker to run the company. Yeah, I focused on just going and doing as much lead generation as possible, because that was infinitely more scalable.
So you lean in, you go into the marketing, and what happens there?
Well, so it was going gangbusters and going great up until about 2008. Um, and then an interesting combination of things happened. It was kind of a perfect storm of things gone wrong. 2008, and we were all in real estate,
Mm.
all in the business, all in my marketing company, spending six figures a month, and all in with, the big house and the country club and the golf course.
Meaning your lifestyle ramped up.
And then it quickly went to zero.
Oh,
And yeah, things got ugly really fast, like overnight. Agents, when I was giving agents advances on leads because we were killing it months earlier, and the market dried up, and agents weren't paying their bills, but I was paying six figures a month in advertising. I had employees. I had 2 full-time programmers who built out a system to manage all these leads. So I still had overhead, and that was where I learned one of my biggest lessons of, like, the business owner. You get paid last. And when things are good, things are good. But when things are bad, you get paid last.
Negative.
Yeah. And again, so this is where, I don't know, like, things just tend to work out. And if you're doing what you love and you just do your best at it, I don't know, things always tend to work out. I mean, it was ugly. We lost our house.
You lost your house?
We lost our house.
Wow.
Not bankruptcy, but just shy of it. I mean, it was a short sale. The bank emptied. They said, all right, we'll let you out of this house, but we're emptying your bank accounts. You can keep $2,000 for moving expenses.
$2,000.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
We rented a U-Haul, had some friends pack us up. They kicked us out of our house and moved into my parents' basement.
Wow.
So I'm a 40-year-old with 2 kids, had just, been providing my family, taking vacations, living the dream, big house, all that. And then we moved to my parents' basement.
Well, it's free rent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the funny thing is the real estate was still doing okay. And a funny thing happened, because as we were, like, sitting there, like, struggling, barely hanging on, I mean, we were still doing great, but not to afford that lifestyle. Right. And when I say we moved into my parents' basement, they were kind enough to let us do that for the month while we found a new house.
Right.
So things were still going great. And then suddenly I get a call from the biggest franchise in town. I believe they have one of the top 10 franchises in the country, from RE/MAX. And they long story short, they bought my marketing company.
They bought the marketing company because they wanted to feed there. So that's really where the value wound up.
Yeah. So they had someone who was actually a friend who ripped my business model off, went to the biggest real estate house in town, and kind of became significant competitors. Mm. Those folks left RE/MAX. So RE/MAX picked up the phone and called me and said, we loved what these guys did, and you're our biggest competitor. We don't know how you do it. So they bought us.
Wow. So you got some money.
My next career.
So you made some money there, and then did they require you to stay on, obviously, for some period of time and pay you a salary, or?
I was basically a consultant for them for a few years. I mean, it was perfect timing for us. I gave full disclosure. I said, okay, this is 2009, things have changed and so on. It's going to be tougher, because what had happened is what we had built a decade earlier, technology caught up with us, and, like, what we were doing was something realtors can check a box and add to their website for like $50 a month. Mm. So our service, which was very, very unique and shooting fish in a barrel a decade earlier, had become a commodity that it is just standard practice. Like, nowadays, you say, oh, well, I'll send you custom triple alerts of houses that meet your needs. It's like, well, yeah, any realtor can do that. But we started doing that 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good buyout. It was great timing, especially since we no longer had our, $15,000 a month lifestyle in the McMansion.
Right.
And that basically paved the way. So I was still kind of trying to make real estate work. And then a mentor from conferences that I go to basically pulled me aside. And he's like, dude, what are you doing? Like you're spinning your wheels trying to sell houses. That's not your skill set. Your skill set is marketing. Go consult. Here's a client. Go help them sell more fire extinguishers.
Wow.
And I mean, I got a client dropped in my lap. And then suddenly, like, word got out that Joel's the AdWords guy. And next thing I know, I'm a consultant. Google
AdWords was your magic.
Mm-hmm. So, I gained all of my experience spending millions of dollars in real estate, which I comfortably grew up to because I started on a shoestring budget and I knew my numbers. And I made lots of mistakes. I once lost $3,000 while going to the movies because I forgot to check a box and geo-target just Denver.
Yeah,
I was doing a generic real estate ad to the entire country.
Oh, I fear that too. I check that thing all the time.
Yeah. And it's mistakes like that made me a better consultant because I never made that mistake again. And
I hope it was a good movie
for my clients.
Yeah, I hope that was a really good movie.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't remember because my phone was lighting up. The only reason it was only $3,000 was because my credit card company shut me down or shut Google down. They said, you can't keep having money. This must be fraud. So I had to authorize it. And I was like, oh man, thank God.
Yeah. How lucky are you?
Could have been, I don't know, double or triple that.
And that's something to comment on that. Like things happen when you're online advertising and you haven't set ceilings, the things can happen fast, right? And get out of control. Like 3,000 turns into 20,000 pretty stinking fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And that made for good job security for me as a consultant because, people want to run their business. They want to manage sales and keep track of their own numbers. They don't need advertising on top of that. So it was a perfect transition that I wasn't even expecting. I had to be beaten over the head from someone else who saw a value in me that I didn't. And even then, another person brought me to speak at his conference. You remember, so I'm starting out, but my head is still in the gutter. I'm still a failure. In my own head. I've lost this. Who's going to want my help? I'm a moron who went bankrupt, had his bank account emptied by the bank, and moved into his parents' basement. It's kind of hard to get past that. But
I've had a few failures in my time where you got to pick your rear up, and I'm laughing not at you, but because I know exactly what that feels like. Like right. You're thinking to yourself, how am I going to charge or sell anything to someone when I'm flat on my butt? Like, how's that work? But you picked yourself up. That's what we got.
My friends picked me up. My friends and my mentors picked me up. I don't know how long it would have taken me, if at all. I was charging, I'm like, well, I'm going to these conferences. Most of these people have small businesses. I don't know. Can they pay $50 an hour? Can they pay a $500 a month retainer? Like that's where my head was. And someone brought me out to speak at an event. And he said, all right, what do you sell? Like they call them eat what you kill conferences. Like there are two types of conferences where, they'll pay people to come and speak. And then there are others where you come and speak for free and you pitch your stuff and they keep a percentage. So this was one of those. Like it was a guy who had it was a mastermind conference of like, a small room, but big hitters. And he said, F you are not getting on my stage charging $50 an hour.
Yeah, right.
And no, and you're giving away your time for a minimum of $500 a month. Like, what, you working for plumbers and like small town accountants? No, add a zero. And I'm like, what? I don't care if you go back to your cheap rates later, but add a zero on my stage. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get any clients, but all right. It's your commissions too. And I never looked back.
So that
with my rates. I was $500 an hour and a minimum $5,000 a month retainer. And that's, for AdWords consulting, which is a percentage of spend. So people, I basically only worked with high-end clients because if you're going to spend $5,000 a month, you probably got to be spending $50,000 in advertising minimum to make that worth your while. 30 to 50 minimum. So it was just overnight. So I kind of went from speaking on stages, obviously knowing my stuff, but not knowing my own value, to being, again, beaten over the head by yet another friend who saw value in me that I didn't see in myself. So a friend in college saw it in me that I didn't see. Towards the end of the real estate career, real estate saw it in me when I didn't even know they were watching me. Or Remax saw it in me. Transitioning into consulting, multiple friends are like, dude, you know this stuff inside and out. You got to go out and share that. Forget putting keys in doors. That's not your skill set.
I think that's a good lesson for entrepreneurs, that you have to surround yourself with people, mentors and friends. I think sometimes just going out to lunch and telling someone who's not in your flow. Someone said to me, I mean, it's amazing how those things, I call them pivotal moments, right, Joel, where someone says something to you and it just changes the trajectory of your entire life of how you're thinking about something. And you sparked a memory. I was fighting someone in our neighborhood. I'm not going to go into it because I want to talk about and get out of town and how you wound up there. But I was fighting someone in the neighborhood, and I went to talk to one of my mentors just as a check-in, and he's like, "What's bothering you?" And I said, "Well, this is what's really happening." And he said to me, "You need to let that go. Your business is more important. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to live there forever. And just, you're not going to live there forever. Like, release me from all of this frustration and anger that I was having because, it's that little thing. So with you, it's, hey, Joel, you're selling real estate. Why don't you just do that?" And I'm listening to you here. And I'm thinking, oh my God, Joel, you could have made so much money because you could have gone and got insurance leads, like, which were paying back then. And, when you and I were in the early days, they were paying $50 to $125 a lead for life insurance leads, and things like that. So, you're really, I guess, you got to be grateful for the people around us who are willing to speak up too.
Yeah. Yeah. They would hand me clients on a silver platter because they knew those clients needed my help. Because they were spinning their wheels, spending lots of money and getting mediocre returns. And, I could step in and help them improve that. And they would gladly pay to keep me on board to do that. And I could do, what would take other people 40 hours a week in 5 or 10 hours a week. So, it was just a good match, and it was a great fit for nearly a decade.
For 10 years, you basically ran a digital marketing agency.
Yeah. Yeah. And just totally from my home. So I went from having 70 agents, 70 contractors, and a handful of employees, to just a one-man shop for like 10 years. I still have the same assistant. She's transitioned into the travel business with me. And she's the most amazing assistant I've ever had.
Virtual assistant?
Yeah. Yeah. She started out at $1 an hour.
And how did you find her, just for the people listening? Because everyone asked me, like, hey, Brandon, how do you do that? And, how do you?
Lots of trial and error, but I kind of got it down to a system. I've hired dozens of virtual workers for various projects. Most of them are for one-off projects, and I think that's the key. She started off as a one-off projects to help me with some article stuff. Like, this was in the Wild West days of SEO, where you're spinning out content so you get links pointing back at your site and all this kind of crazy SEO stuff. And so she was helping with like the manual labor part of that. And I don't know, she just did a great job on a one-off project, and I kept hiring her. And then it was like, well, heck, let's double your income. I'll give you $2 an hour, and I just want you full time. Like whether I have work for you or not, I want you full time. Like just promise me that when I ask for something to be done, it'll be done. And I mean, she's done everything from design to, grunt work to now she runs my team of 8 analysts in our travel business.
Wow.
So, we've given her quite a big raise. It's still less than what I would pay in the US.
Right.
She's elated and I'm elated, and it's a wonderful partnership.
Yeah. She's probably making, for her, where she lives is probably, she's rich. Now I want to, or very well off. I want to step back for a minute because you have 10 years of working on online advertising and Google AdWords specifically, it sounds like, is where you leaned in. And I know Facebook ads as well, which we'll talk about when we get to how you transitioned out of the digital agency into your newest gig. If you were to give people 1 or 2 tips for Google AdWords, what would they be? And do you feel like, I feel like the trend has all these people on the internet. Some of them I don't think know what they're talking about, quite frankly, but the trend is, hey, you got to do Facebook ads, which means you're probably by default doing Instagram ads, which you probably don't completely understand if you're that person. But everyone seems to have forgotten Google AdWords. At least I don't hear it as much. And I'm interested in your opinion because you've obviously done this from, we did AOL keywords and then, impressions, and then there was link exchanges, and then there was, I don't know, all these ad networks.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think we are today? And do you think, so 2 tips for someone running ads who's paying for ads. And then what do you think about, the trend currently of where people should spend the money? Is Google AdWords still a viable option?
Oh, I think Google AdWords is still great, depending on your market. So I think if I were to choose 2 tips, the first would be know your audience's buying intent. So like if we skip a few decades back for an analogy, Google AdWords or any pay-per-click type advertising is the equivalent of a phone book 20 years ago. You go to the phone book when you have a leak in your house and you look up a plumber. You're going to hire a plumber in the very near future. You go to the phone book when your doorbell stops working. You go to the phone book when you need your lawn mowed, or that's what you did 30 years ago. Or it could be the modern day version of Yelp. You have a wallet out need. So Google is great for that because you can bid on the exact keywords that someone with their wallet out is searching for. So that's intent-based marketing. Someone has an immediate intent of using the service that they're looking for, most likely, or they're at least in the research stages. So Google AdWords is great for that because people still go to Google to search for that. Maybe they look at Yelp ads, they look at whatever, or they look at your ad if you're advertising there. The other side of the fence is Facebook advertising or Google Display Network advertising. Completely different type of advertising. You're not necessarily bidding on keywords. You're bidding on keywords that are on a blog that they're reading, or you're bidding on targeted audiences that Facebook says, all right, do you want to market to seniors or millennials or people who have recently been traveling? So you bid on audiences, but they're not necessarily searching for a solution that you have. So that's more a long-term play. So you have to know which is it. Are you a plumber? And with that, you don't need a newsletter. You don't need follow-up. If someone's basement is flooding, they don't need 10 quick tips on how to have your plumbing last a long time.
Right.
So you need to know which type of business you are so you can advertise on the right medium. Advertise on the wrong medium and you're just throwing money down the drain. if I were to advertise on Google Adwords, which I literally, I didn't tell you about that, but
you wrote the book.
I wrote the book. I don't use Google Adwords myself for my new business. That's another funny story. Like, a competitor saw something in me, and he said, "I'm not writing the third edition of Google AdWords for Dummies unless we throw it out, start over, and you help me rewrite it from scratch."
So let's go. So let's. You're doing the digital agency. Thanks for those tips. You're doing the digital agency. Let's talk about how you get to write a book. You got asked to write a book, and then figure out how we transitioned into just get out of town. So let's go to the book. I'm glad I think you told me about that. I totally forgot, to be honest with you, Joel. But so how does that happen?
So I had kind of gotten past the not seeing value in myself, gotten to the high paid stuff. Howard was a brilliantly smart guy. He had an ad agency. He had a team with him. And we were both speaking at a conference, and they misscheduled some stuff. And they said, whatever, let's just throw the two AdWords guys on a stage, and instead of a presentation, we'll call it a mastermind. So like, they threw us and another like ex-Google employee who had an info product on how to buy traffic on Google. They threw us all on stage, and they said, "Sorry, you're not doing a presentation anymore. You're just doing this roundtable mastermind." And Howard and I were just like two pistons in an engine. I mean, just in perfect symbiosis with each other. Like, he's right-brained, visual storytelling. I'm geeky, left-brain, analytical. And so, like, we're on stage, and even though we're competitors, we're just sitting there going, "Oh, I didn't even think of that. But when you do this with the remarketing tag, you can tag them and then take that and remarket to this specific audience," or whatever. And it wasn't necessarily that we were like finding new discoveries for each other, but we just worked really well together. And we kept in touch. We traded tips and so on. I mean, big blue ocean. There's no such thing as a competitor, even though we were direct competitors.
Right.
And I don't know, a few months later, he said, "So Wiley has approached me about writing a third edition for AdWords, and I'm not going to do it unless you help me." So next thing I know, an offer of a book. And, that was 6 or 8 years ago. But I mean, I had to start turning clients away at that point.
To write the book, to basically.
No, just because I had the credentials of writing the book.
Got it.
And, like, when I went to do conferences, I mean, my philosophy is always like, I don't feel like I've done a good job presenting unless I see nothing but the tops of heads with people just furiously writing notes of tips and tricks and things they can go and do themselves. And so that was my presentation style. And typically 99% of the room would do that and go and empower themselves to get more effective with advertising. And 1% was usually someone in the back of the room saying, "I'm not doing that stuff."
Right.
And would hire me to help them with their large and successful company. So.
Well, that's awesome. And I totally forgot. Yeah. So is that that was the third edition of Google AdWords for Dummies?
Correct. Yeah. It's, we wrote it, with the intent of being evergreen so that a rewrite wouldn't be necessary.
Got you.
And it's 100%. The only thing that doesn't exist is kind of a keyword strategy that we talked about that I'm glad to talk about, but we could get pretty granular with that.
Yeah, maybe we would do a follow-up on just your expertise, because I'm actually implementing that we talked about that night. Probably ask you for your help at some point, because I'm not as up to speed. I haven't done that in a long time. But yeah, let's take the listeners from now. You wrote a book, which you had the opportunity to write that book because you were putting yourself out there and doing conferences and meeting people. Because just like you and I met, like, if you don't put yourself out there and balance sort of going to conferences, you're not going to meet those the experts that are smarter than you. I mean, and that
Yeah.
ultimately could lead to writing a book, which puts you on the map. And now, your lead generation is that book effectively, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great resume piece. I mean, I worked for Mars, helping them
Wow.
craft ads that they would turn around and shape their commercials from. So yeah, I mean, that was a game changer. Just having my name in a book. I mean, we didn't make squat from the book.
Right.
That was pocket change. But to say that you wrote a book and not a self-published book, like a legitimate Wiley publication, that helped a lot.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So how do we get to just get out of town? Like now, we're at the end of your digital, or we're 10 years in, you write this book. And now again, Joel, you're going to dump this whole thing and jump into something else. How's that happen?
I think the biggest thing was that I was just really blessed with a lot of very good clients, very good low maintenance clients. I was able to turn clients who I thought would be high maintenance away. I was very well paid and probably only working 10 or 15 hours a week.
Because you automated a lot of this?
Stuff. I was mostly because people wanted to pay a premium to have a guy with the credentials on call for when things go wrong. And there's always something that goes wrong. And so they paid well to know that I was there to address the issue whenever that happened. And it didn't happen very often because I was a big believer in setting up clean accounts that don't run haywire on you, because I learned that lesson a decade earlier.
Right.
So I had all of my clients it was either that or just $500 an hour consulting clients, which, I still kept a few of them because that's the fun stuff. Like that's helping the small business owners, and we hop on a call a month and just say, okay, let's turn this up. Let's turn this down. This is working really well. Let's do more of that. And I mean, that's where my passion was, but it just still wasn't really fulfilling me. And then, with all of this free time we had kind of built a travel lifestyle that I went through a divorce after the house loss, not because of the house loss, but other issues. Right. And, so I suddenly had all of this free time on my hands every other week. So I started traveling. And when I started traveling, I stopped being depressed. I became more successful with work because I was more productive and more plugged in because of giving myself a break every once in a while. And it became something again, wasn't really thinking of going this direction, but I just kind of got tired of telling people or responding to people who were just like, man, I wish I could travel like you. And so I kind of just built this blog that would show people how they could travel like me. And because, I mean, my assistant, who had been with me 7 years back then, to keep her busy, I had her search out for travel deals for me to take. So every day she sent me a deal of the day in the States, a deal of the day in the Caribbean and Mexico, because I'm a certified diver. I like going diving. Deal of the day to Europe. Deal of the day to, heck, maybe Asia and Africa, if it's a good enough deal. So I would just have her like scour the internet and find a deal of the day. I built an algorithm because I wrote a book about algorithms.
Right.
So I'd have her run that algorithm and then cherry pick deal of the day. And then, before I knew it, I just said, well, gosh, this is a waste on just me. So Just Get Out of Town was born.
So you write that you basically solve something for yourself is what you were ultimately doing, because you were looking for affordable, I don't want to say cheap, but affordable deals to travel, which ultimately got you out of your depression. And you said, hey, maybe someone else will do this. So you just throw up a blog, and now did you start posting on that blog, hey, here's the deal I found today? Or, how did that MVP, because your product is way more advanced now. I mean, it's not just humans searching in the background. You've got algorithms that you built and things like that. But is that how you tested it? You threw up a blog, put it on there, and then told a bunch of friends? Was that the model?
And that became the same thing. Like, because a lot of friends, most of them weren't really paying attention because everyone has in their head, travel's expensive. I'll look into this when I can afford to take a trip. And it's like, no, that's backwards logic. So I quickly outgrew trying to help my friends. It's like, yeah, a couple of my friends adopted this philosophy. And we take trips with them now. In fact, some of them are visiting us right now because, they've just learned to travel more. So they came out for the weekend to hang out over their fall break. So a very small percentage of friends did it, but I'm like, still, this is too valuable to waste. So I actually started giving it away for free. And the original goal was to just kind of become an influencer, make revenue through advertising, etc. And I quickly built up to like 20,000 Facebook followers just in Denver. Because I was just in Denver in the beginning. Something unanticipated happened is like people started complaining, this is bogus, these deals aren't available, total scam, etc. Like at first it was the best thing since sliced bread when I had like 3,000 or 4,000 subscribers. And I hit 20,000 subscribers and it all changed.
Were you doing any advertising, or was this all organic?
This was some light advertising.
Okay.
Light advertising, and then a little bit, it's probably half and half viral, half advertising.
Got you.
Because it was free service. I was intending on, just making money from advertising, and that probably could have worked if I continued to grow at that pace. But I quickly realized that like these are all limited seats. So all of these fares, there's kind of a science to it. You have to look every day because they change every day. And every day airlines have their own algorithm that says, okay, we've got a flight to Paris in 10 months that's only 7% full. That's not good. If we continue at that pace, we're going to have 10 planes that are only half full going to Paris. So let's just quietly slash prices and get 10 or 12 butts in seats so that we can like feel good that we're on pace to be at capacity by the time that flight hits in 10 months. So because these are very limited seats and I have 20,000 people all looking at those seats, they're selling out and prices are going back up, and everyone who misses out on the deal is screaming bloody murder. So it went from like the most awesome thing ever to like being accused of being a scammer and so on. I mean, I still keep up my Denver page, and half of them are like totally bogus now that you have to pay for it and so on. But it's like, since doing that, now the serious buyers get first dibs on the trips. And we still give trips away to free subscribers, but only 3 days after the serious buyers had a look at it.
Got it. And then you transitioned it, and then you basically took that group feedback and then started your blog website, which you run currently for, I forget what you told me, how many, 20 or 30 different regions?
Yeah, we're in 30 territories. It's pretty much the 30 biggest airports. At first, it started out as like just 6 new territories, and that was where I had friends and family. And then we just kind of grew more strategically after that.
Now, for the listeners, you can go to, can they go to jgoot.com too to get
Correct.
here? Yeah.
Just typing it in, that's a lot easier.
Yeah. Two ways to get here. You can go to justgetoutoftown.com or jgoot.com. And someone comes on to the website and then they want to customize, I mean, maybe not, but customize ultimately for me here in the Bay Area in Northern California, I would want to put in San Francisco, and your service will send me a daily email that says, hey, Brandon, these are the deals that are going to leave San Francisco to go to Paris or the Seychelles Islands or South Africa, wherever that is. You need to act now.
Correct. So it's basically, I mean, from the menu up top, you can go and choose a territory. It's under free tools. You can subscribe to our blog and get tips and tricks. That's always free. You can subscribe to our free trip alert service, which is basically a sampling of about 8 or 10% of the trips that we send our paid subscribers. And it's, like we verify that they're still available 3 days later, and we say, here you go. And the idea is that you can just try us out for as long as you like. and just see if you like the trips that we send you. So pretty straightforward. Yeah, if you can, I mean, you get 2 or 3 a week, which is plenty, as long as you're flexible, because that's the key with this. Our motto is don't plan a trip and hope for a good deal. Find a good deal and go there. And that's kind of what we do with the free subscription.
Oh, I was just subscribing on here for those watching on YouTube. It says I'm already in here. I must have done that when we were there. And I'm on your page, and I'm seeing people are doing this just constantly. Sarah from Greenwood, Indiana, just signed up for a premium subscription. I mean, you've got a lot of people doing this.
Yeah, we're slowly working towards making Jay Good a verb. It is a mindset. It's not, you can't go to our site and say, what have you got to Cabo from June 20th to 25th? You could say, what have you got in the month of June? Or what have you got to Mexico and the Caribbean? Or if you don't have a passport, what have you got that's a good deal in the States? And the whole idea is, it's pretty simple, but it's a hard concept to get your head around, because most people are accustomed to waiting until they've got plans for a trip and then going and looking and wasting dozens of hours doing that. Our concept is, this is for vacations, for spontaneous weekends. Most of us can be a little bit flexible. And by flexible, maybe you go to Costa Rica instead of Cabo because it's half the cost. Maybe you have to take your kids out of school on a Friday because the fare is a third of the cost, and so on.
Yeah, but you're saving big bucks. I mean, your deals that you're giving people are not trivial. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong from when we were talking. I mean, it's go to France from San Francisco for $299 round trip type thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to waste your time for a Europe trip that's any more than $500. It's usually in the $300 range. It occasionally dips into the mid to high 200s.
Now, I'm scrolling through here. For those on the podcast, like I said, you can go here, justgetoutoftown.com. This thing's awesome. You've got tons of quality reviews here too. I didn't watch all the videos after we met, but I read all these Facebook things. I'm a member of your Facebook group. Now, you are not doing any more digital consulting. Is that right? You're all in on justgetoutoftown.com.
Correct. And for entrepreneurial lesson, this is the first one where I had the best of both worlds. I would have been crazy to get rid of the clients that I got rid of, but I only had to work 10 or 15 hours a week. So I was able to build this business on the side. And that's probably the best way to ever start a business, is to not need it for the money and do it because you see a need in the market. For me, I saw a need there. This didn't exist. And I feel like I have literally grabbed some friends by the shoulder and shaken them. It's like, no, you need to do this way, because if you want to travel, there's no more affordable way. And so it's the first one where this is the first job where I'm probably the pushiest that I've ever been. Like in a realtor, it was like, I know how to find clients. If you want to work with me, great. If not, that's cool. And this is kind of the same, this is the opposite, I should say, in that, I firmly believe in this. If you're complaining about not getting to travel enough, in my opinion, this is the solution. Because once you adopt this mindset, you just simply start traveling more through osmosis. I mean, you just can't help it. If your best friend lives in Miami, and you haven't seen him in a decade, and you see a $50 flight to Miami, guess what? You're traveling. You weren't planning on a trip, but when you could fly to Miami for $50, why not? And the philosophy is, we do the watching, we do the heavy lifting. I've got 8 full-time people who just watch those, analyze those, and send a summary of just what we feel are the absolute best deals on the internet that day. And then we do the same thing the next day.
Yeah, I mean, for what you save and what it would cost to try to do this yourself. It's, I think, what do you charge a year, two something?
Yeah, 297.
I mean, one trip you're going to get the money back. And it's not as if it's, hey, Brandon, these trips, you're leaving tomorrow. I mean, they could be 3 or 4 months out in advance, which still gives me time to plan, right?
Oh yeah, we specifically try not to make sure people know that we are not a last minute fare service.
Right. So
We try to make sure there's at least 2 weeks notice, and sometimes there's as much as 10 months notice. So like some people say, oh, well, I'm not going to join because I'm not planning on traveling till spring break. Dude, it's too late to plan for spring break. Like we've got people that booked spring break trips months ago.
right.
I think one of those testimonials is from someone who, like they commented, like I was just browsing an email, and next thing I know, like the next hour of my day was dedicated to making sure I could make it work. And we're flying to Paris for spring break for $267.
Yeah, that's
direct
ridiculous.
from LA.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So,
It's a great service.
Yeah, I like it, and I mean, I appreciate the plug, but I feel like we've navigated from talking to entrepreneurs to pitching my stuff.
Well, we're going to talk about where you are. We got to talk about where you are and your current business, and how you got here. But now this thing is full time. So let's talk about what is. You were working 15 hours a week. You're building this as a side hustle effectively, and I think that's why you and I hit it off. It's really been my whole life. It seems like I don't know what it is. Maybe I have ADD or something, but you're really funding your next business or ideas with the money that you get from your free cash flow from your other ones, at least from an entrepreneur mindset, right? And if you get a big one, then you lean in, and that's been me. Like if I find one and I lean in, the last one, then I went out and raised a whole bunch of money and built a software company. And then for a while, I didn't have a side hustle because I didn't have time. And then you get the time like you did in your digital agency. And you're like, hey, maybe I can do this side project. So, so what is you're doing this full time now, no more digital advertising clients. What does your day look like? Because you are super busy. You were either traveling when I was trying to get a hold of you, or you were working. I have a feeling that you were working. So what does a day look like for you now?
And I feel like I should backtrack a little. Like when I met I've remarried. When I met my wife and when we were dating, and even early in our marriage, I was just consulting, and I was relaxed, working 10 hours a week, doing whatever I wanted the rest of the time, traveling a lot, etc. And then the light bulb went off for this, and I became a different person. So the average day now compared to the average day 10 years into a successful career is totally different. And I mean, I probably average 70, 80 hours a week. But the key, I feel like I can't help but say that that's probably one of the most important things for anyone thinking of starting a business is don't do it because it makes money. Do it because you love it. If you can't find something that you absolutely love and are passionate about, do it because you're really good at some aspect of it. Because you're gonna be working a lot. Anyone that says you can start a business turnkey and just have it an overnight success is lying. They're selling you something. They're probably selling you a course on how to do it. And by the time you figure out that it's a lot of work, it's too late to ask for a refund. There's no business that is not a lot of hard work to start. So if that's the case, it may as well be something you love. And I love this. I now have a goal of at least a daily unsolicited feedback from someone saying, thank you. I just flew my son home for Thanksgiving because you sent me a $50 flight. Or, I just took my family of 5 on our first vacation in 6 years. So I'm addicted to that. I mean, the money will follow.
Well, the money is following. Let's just talk about that. I don't want to give away I know there's a few other people in the market, so I don't want to give away, but I can tell you that in the closed room, Joel is making real money with this thing. And I mean real money. This isn't a $5,000 a month thing. This is real money. And it's growing at a regular pace. And the thing that And I just, if you can, Joel, touch on this because it's really important. You know, I see all these things on the internet, like you just talked about, like, hey, buy the course and you're going to make $5,000 a day and it's magic and you're going to build this great business and all of that. And then, and here's the kicker, Joel, and you're going to laugh because you know that on the contact, it says, I'm really sorry that I can't get back to you in person. I am so busy that I'm so inundated with emails. And I look at that, I'm like, I ran a website with 175,000 uniques a month. I had my email list, 100,000 people. I had thousands of subscribers and I answered each one of them. And the thing that struck me yesterday when we caught up and you called me back was you said, hey man, I'm sorry. But I call all my subscribers personally. And, you know, a lot of people would say, oh, Joel, I'm a bigwig. I'm running just getoutoftown.com. I got this, you know, I don't want to say you're printing money, but you got a good machine here that does well and you're providing a service for it. So, but you are still calling every subscriber to welcome them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, again, that was adaptation. That was, that at first, when I started this company, I was totally the guy of like, don't ask me that. That's on the blog. Don't ask me that. That's not the JU way of travel. And, I mean, I wasn't that blunt, but that was a little bit of my attitude. You know, it's like, if you're going to respond to an email that says how you can go do this yourself for free and then ask me to do it for you,
right.
You know, those go by the wayside. But what I realized, like when we really started pouring gas on the fire to turn it up because we had something that was working. So we started spending 6 figures on advertising a month to just bring people in, start getting the word out more. It was great. And then like 4 or 5 months in, we had a big problem. Like our monthly, because we had a $1 trial in the beginning. You could try for 30 days for $1, and then you get billed $24 a month after that. And that was great. People who didn't know us and didn't trust us yet could at least do it on a trial basis. But the problem is when there's no vested interest in the beginning and it's $1, they don't read the terms of service. They forget that they're going to get billed every month. 4 and 6 months later, they call their bank and say, I didn't agree to this. So we had these huge chargebacks. And it was at the point where it was going to shut my business down. It's like, it says right there, $1, then $24 until you cancel. And all you have to do is send us an email to cancel. But it was easier for people to just call their bank and say, I want my money back. And the banks, you know, they're very, and I mean, we'll give a refund. If you don't want our service, you can ask for a refund. But chargebacks became a big issue. So we did 2 things. We got rid of the $1 trial and the monthly subscriber. We actually raised prices, and we added personal service because we were identifying that people weren't actually like using what they were paying for. So I started, you know, to help with chargebacks, we just checked the box that said require an address. That way they can't say it's fraud. You know, and you know, we even added an oops policy where we say, look, you can ask for a refund 30 days after any charge whatsoever. But again, like if they're not reading the stuff, then they're going to call their bank anyway.
So you just do a quick call and say, hey, thanks for joining, spend 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, is that the
on average, it's 2 minutes tops. And I mean, they're elated that I called them personally. A, they're elated that they're getting a personal phone call. B, they're elated that it's actually me because I'm the one with all the videos. I'm the one writing all the blog posts.
Right.
And C, this was the intangible that we didn't realize. I mean, they're paying more now, but they're using the service, which kind of comes back to that same thing. My friend who told me add a 0, like people weren't paying attention when I was charging $50 an hour. They weren't doing what I told them to. When I was charging $500 an hour, they were writing notes and implementing this stuff, and their businesses were more successful. So I didn't even know that, but I kind of revived an old thing. So yes, rates are higher because we give more personal service. I now have a full-time assistant, and she's unbelievable. This is our U.S. stateside person. She's a subscriber herself. She has taken 20 JU inspired trips. She came to work for me after her 10th trip, and it was a round trip first class flight to the Dominican Republic for $450.
Wow.
Yeah, she handles all of our customer correspondence, helps them when, if they have login problems or can't figure the system out, because they think that, a lot of people sign up thinking that they can, find a cheaper flight to Cabo on June 20th, and it's not quite that. So the purpose of the call is kind of an onboarding call, and just say, hey, like if you read if you watch the video, great. If you don't have time, just do this one thing. Just check your email every day. That's it. And yeah, they love it. And retention has gone up, satisfaction has gone up. And honestly, I feel like testimonials of people successfully booking trips have gone up, because I've just kind of shared a couple things in person that they're not going to read in a blog post on how they can best use the system. But yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's a big chunk of my day, especially on, if we have a sale or something. Like yesterday, I was slammed with phone calls.
But it works. And do you think, you'll keep it up as long as you can ultimately, right? And if it works and it increases retention, then actually it is work. That is your job as the business owner, and the head guy is to talk to the people, not put on there, hey, I'm really busy, I might not get back to you. I think that's crazy. Those are the people that pay us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And once they subscribe, my job isn't to sell them trips. They're paying me to find trips that they have the option of going on. We don't make a commission on them. So my job is to convince them to renew again next year. And the only way I can do that is by, making sure that they know that I'm not some bot in China sending trips that may or may not work. Like, we're a real business. We're human beings. Sometimes we make mistakes. If we do, email us. We'll figure it out. So.
Well, I want to thank you. I know you got phone calls to make to more customers, and I know you've got your travel guests there, and I'm really grateful for you taking the time this morning, because we fit this in and you made it work, and I'm grateful for that. And really
Thank you.
Grateful for sharing like insights that entrepreneurs generally won't share, because they want you to see the new car, the big house, the country club, and all that stuff. And, it doesn't, yes, to all the listeners, you do get that if you work hard and you solve a problem for a customer, but that journey is not always easy. So thank you so much. I'm going to invite you back. I'll give you a break here to go do some sales and ramp that business up some more, which I know you're doing, especially after that mastermind. Like, that was incredible meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's changed. I did something from that thing, and my landing page jumped. I was only at 47% conversion, and the last 2 days I'm up to 80. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mine's the same. I implemented stuff, and you said Perry. Is it okay if we say his full name?
Yeah. Perry. Yeah. Perry was there. He was presenting.
Perry Belcher. The guy's brilliant, and he cares. He loves his clients, his readers, his followers, and man, he knows his stuff. And I did the same thing. We made some changes to our sales page, and again, what we do is very unique. It's hard to get people to realize that these kind of prices are possible. Like, there's a lot of disbelief, but I made a few tweaks, and our results are the same. It's already paid for itself.
Yeah, it was Perry Belcher he's a master. Mastermind master. It was awesome. I'm just grateful I met you and a few other people. We hung out that night, and still in touch with them and the tips and whatnot. I'm going to invite you back, because you did remind me that you did write the Google Ads for Dummies book. And if you're willing, we'll go through and talk about some tips and tricks that people can use there, because I think there's still some misinformation, and there's still some people out there who claim to be digital marketers and know Facebook ads and Google ads and some other avenues that you can use, and quite frankly, don't clearly understand what to do. And as a business owner, I think it's really just in being empowered. You don't have to know how to go into these consoles and do it all, but you do need to know the right questions to ask. And I think you know all the right questions to ask and everything. So, and I'm grateful for that tip you gave me. I'm going to report back to you on that.
Cool. Yeah.
Enjoy your weekend, and we'll have you back in a few weeks. Thanks so much, Joel.
Thank you, Brandon. Have a good day.